Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with certified hypnotherapist Anna Machkalov. She has over 23 years of experience in cosmetic medicine, where she worked closely with patients at some of their most vulnerable moments, developing a deep understanding of the mind-body connection and the role safety, trust, and perception play in healing. Alongside her medical career, Anna has spent even longer immersed in the study of consciousness and the subconscious mind, an inquiry that led her to formal hypnotherapy training during the pandemic. From her base in Los Angeles, we cover the whole story. Enjoy this interview. Well, I got a pocket full of marionette strings, so we'll dive in. It will be a good organic conversation. So let's get in there and let's get it going. So it's great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out today.
You as well, Joe. It's my honor.
So let's begin our journey with this question. Looking at the calendar right now, we're in March. 6 years ago, this pandemic was starting to take hold. How did you get through the coronavirus era, and how has it changed the way that you approach life today?
You know, that's an interesting question that you actually brought it back there, because that's when my life shifted. I was in the medical field for 23 years. So I was running a medical office, and during the pandemic is when I actually decided to make the shift and dive into hypnotherapy pretty much, head first. Really just kind of trust my intuition, trust my passion, trust my goal. And, it's something that I've wanted to do and I've had an interest in for so many years. I can't, probably as far back as I can remember. But, life takes over. You just kind of start going about your day. I had a great position. I was running a medical office in Beverly Hills, California, cosmetic practice. So, I was okay. I was more than okay, actually, but something inside was stirring. And so when you ask, how did I get through the pandemic? For me, it was really focus. It was shifting my perspective, which is essentially everything we do. You can either focus on what's wrong or you can focus on what's right. And given a purpose, given something that you're looking forward to, it shifted my purpose. It gave me, I didn't really know what it's going to look like in the end. Or not even use the word the end, I didn't know what the ultimate goal was going to be. I just knew what I wanted to do. And so I started shifting my goals. And that's where I went.
Yeah, no. And I think, I realized at that time personally that, I did more interviews than ever because I just had my jazz radio show at the time. But I knew that going after life the same way was going to be the key to this. It had a monopoly on us, and we were going to have to figure out a way to live that time, because we weren't going to get it back, and nothing was going to change until, it did change, and it was weird too, because there was all these undulations of, all right, it looks like we're slowing down, and then there was a variation that would come out. It was a very strange time of psychological push and pull.
And I think that's what kind of, for a lot of people, what I saw, was this ability to pivot, ability to kind of say, okay, what I thought isn't. And it really serves us even great in today's world. There's so much of what is going on all around us. And if we pigeonhole ourselves into what we think something should look like, or what we think our lives should be, that's when we start kind of, getting up against that resistance. It's really, I think, having that fluidity and saying, okay, maybe it doesn't look exactly like what I thought, but let's see what I can gather from this.
For sure. So let me ask you this. If I was to put you in front of a bunch of 13-year-olds at career day and you needed to explain your profession of what you do on a daily basis, how do you synthesize that for their brains?
Oh, I love it. 13-year-olds. First of all, I'd be like, pay attention, put your phone down.
Right.
That would be first and foremost. And if I can manage to do that, then I would, it's interesting. I would say what I do is really help people get out of their own way. And helping us get out of our own way could look different for everyone. But at the end of the day, we all have some limiting beliefs that are, whether they stem further back into our childhood or whether they're more current, something that put us into fight, flight, and we cemented a behavior, a limiting belief, a trigger, or whatever it is. But we're all essentially in our own way. Most of what we do and most of our issues in our lives are based on what we present and what we're afraid of, rather than actual situations and problems. Of course, there's that too. I'm not diminishing, the obvious situations that people go through, the health problems, the divorce, the relationships, the, careers. I'm not diminishing that by any means, but so much of what we go through on a daily basis is, over 90%, 88 to 90% of what we do is from that subconscious filter.
So, speaking to the younger kids and just in general, how much is this advent of AI and the way that the kids use it and the way that it's being proliferated, how much is that seeping into the psychological underpinnings of not only our conscious thought that when we're awake, but subconsciously? How do you think this is going to affect and shape the way the human mind develops into the future?
And another brilliant question, Joe. I mean, I don't think we can even begin to fathom what AI is going to do because it's so exponentially bigger, than anything we could have imagined, I think, in modern brain society. So if you're thinking about how it can proliferate our subconscious, who knows? There are so many we're meaning making machines. Humans are meaning making machines. Everything we take in with our senses, and it's not just the five senses, it's subliminal as well. It's sensory. It's so many different things we take in from the environment. We make meaning and then we behave in a certain way. And so when you ask about AI, how that plays a role, I mean, who knows how much of that is going to be in our day-to-day life? And, to take it even a step further, who knows how much of our autonomy we're giving up? I read something about students' scores in colleges being so much lower because, when the ones that actually have given up and are using only AI to do their work, and there's a lot that we give up in order to gain, nothing is without a payoff. So yes, AI is fantastic, but I'm not sure how much of it is going to really hinder evolution and the subconscious, programming.
So let me ask you this. When you were in that room at Career Day when you were 13, what was your dream job, your dream gig?
No idea. No idea. And that I would say to a lot of people, probably, I think so many people that don't know, they think something is wrong with them, including myself. I really was kind of feeling like, well, shit, excuse me. If I don't know what is wrong, what I want to do, and I don't know what is, what so many people do, and that's great for them if somebody has that passion and they know what they want to do in Career Day, but a lot of us don't. And so my thing would be to, again, get out of our own way. Everything doesn't look the same for everyone. And we're seeing that more and more in today's society, that not everybody wears the same hat. Not everybody looks the same way. Not everybody figures out what they want to do for the rest of their lives in the same way. I didn't get to my passion until much later in life, and it doesn't make it any more or less valid.
I think it's almost healthier to have this sense of not really knowing because life changes so much. It's kind of that idea of, I remember when I was in high school or when I got out of high school, everybody was like, yeah, your senior year is the best year of your life. And it's like, what a bleak perspective on your existence to pigeonhole that very confusing young time of your life is the best year of your life. And I think it's a lot like careers. I mean, we did career day in the eighth grade in the late '80s, it was like, I remember they said that you would have anywhere between 5 to 10 major career changes potentially, and we all looked around like, what are you talking about? Once you find what you do, there you go. But it's true. It's like we fluctuate so much because we change over time.
Well, we change over time, and also, that's really what it is. So many of us think that we're supposed to be a certain way, and our educational system teaches us to memorize, not to learn. And so if we have this curiosity about, you don't have, just because and let's say you did find a great career and you found your white picket fence and you're doing that, that's great. But you know what? Maybe in 10 years, you're going to have a new passion. Like you said, we change so much throughout our lives. I think the biggest disservice you can do is to think that something has to look a certain way. The biggest indicator of happiness is being able to pivot, is being able to be fluid, being able to say, okay, things can have various ways that they could look. And the ability to say to somebody, you're in high school, if you're 13 years old or if you're 23 years old, you may or you may not know what it is that you want to do. and the world is changing at a very fast pace. So you don't know what you don't know. That's what I always say. We don't know what we're not exposed to. You may be exposed to something in 10 years that you would have never known you have a passion about.
So, talk to me a little bit about who have been inspirational forces that have allowed you in your life to breathe and to figure out your profession, where you're at, what makes sense to you, being comfortable in your skin. Who's that? Who's been that for you?
There's so many. Oh my gosh, there's so many different people. I look to different people within my industry would be like, Joe Dispenza is amazing. He gave me a big, big, big eye opener in neuroplasticity and the fact that our brains are the most plastic part of our bodies. We used to think that once we have a certain set of genes or we have a certain behavior, we're set in stone, but that is so not the case. And so, that's one. There's so many people. I'm bad with remembering and pulling out names. I didn't think I'd be tested. So
Oh no, no, that's a good answer because it's usually there's one that rises to the top for sure. Um, so I'm curious if we were to take a snapshot of your career from the beginning to where you're at today, kind of like we were at a national park and we walk up to the map of the mountain range in front of us. How would you explain how you've gotten where you're at professionally right now?
I would say that I'm constantly, I don't look at this really as a peak or a valley. I look at this more as just like a continual, just gliding along. Because if I'm looking at this as a mountain, then there's ultimately going to be a peak and then a downfall. And to me, it's not really about rising to the peak and then saying what now. To me, this is just a constant movement forward, and because there are so many things to learn, I'm constantly learning, I'm constantly evolving. And again, bringing it back to what I said, you don't know what you don't know. I think for me, it's about not really putting myself into that, into that space of really figuring out that I know where I'm at. I think this is an ever evolving space.
So let me ask you this. If you could meet one person alive on the planet right now, whether they're in your field or in general, and you could talk to them, spend a little time with them, someone that might help you on your journey, who would you love to meet and talk to?
I'd love to talk to my mom again. She's on the other side. That
Yeah.
would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great. People in history, there are so many brilliant minds in history. Again, I'm really not good at picking just one because I'm somebody who takes a little pearl from so many different spaces. So I think that for me, it would just be about, can I just go into that realm for about, 10 hours just to start picking everybody's brain a little at a time? For me, it's more that.
Well, I think the thing that's interesting about those answers is that when you look at generational things, like for instance, most people need to get out of their own way. Most people are the hardest on themselves. And if you go back generations in your family, because there's an enormous line, an enormous bloodline, it would be interesting to find out where traits and where things and where mentalities came from.
Oh, and that's actually, getting into this work has been so instrumental in helping me understand. And one huge thing is that I have learned, and I'm trying to pass on to my clients, is that people talk so much about generational trauma, but we also have generational healing. And so just because something has been passed on to you, and we will always kind of bring forth into our lives what our parents didn't deal with, what our parents left to us to deal with, we're gonna have to deal with it somehow. And then it's our choice to either pass it on to the next generation as a form of healing or as a form of continued trauma. So, I think that looking back, for me, I definitely see, doing this work, I definitely see certain things. But, there's so much not only cultural, I think, that starts to come into play. There's so much that generationally, like you mentioned, people have gone through wars, people have gone through so much trauma that maybe shaped, or obviously shaped the way that they have not been able to heal on an individual level, so there's so much to keep in mind when we think generationally. But I think really, rather than looking, hypnotherapy is not so much about looking back for generations as much as it is, okay, what are we dealing with now? What's the symptom we want to control now in this life? Even if we're doing a past life regression, the question is, how does that influence where we are today? How does that help me with the presenting issue that I'm with today?
So let me ask you this. What is the motivator every day for you to wake up to do this work? I mean, to get into the mind of helping people get to a better place, it's a murky place. There's a lot of complexities. So how do you ground yourself, do a good job for your clients, and protect and take care of your soul every day? What is that energy when the alarm clock either does or doesn't go off in the morning?
I that's an amazing question, Joe, and I think it's so important. As much as it's important for us to continue learning, I think it's important for us to also continue healing. I think that we're never, a finished product, and I think that it's very important for me to ground myself in order for me to show up, as my ultimate best self. I need to be able to ground myself. I need to be able to do my own healing. I see my own therapists, my own hypnotherapist. I have my mentor that I've been with since I've been in school, and I see her, and I, do my own connections. I light candles. I set an intention. I do a lot of, exercise. I think is huge. Energy and motion is emotion. I think that for me to be able to connect to another human being, I need to be able to clear out my space. But it's a work in progress. It's never done.
We kind of talked a little bit, kind of musingly, but seriously as well, about what's going on in this country and in this world right now, particularly in America, with the biggest fears, I think, for a lot of us as humans as we live through this history of what we're going through is war and not feeling safe with immigration and things that are going on. How is that factoring into the work that you're doing with clients that you see? How much of what you're doing is going to be more and more necessary to get us at a more relaxed baseline, or to feel like we have hope when we wake up every day?
Oh my goodness, it's so huge, Joe. It's, nervous system regulation is at the core of every single thing from the moment we open our eyes until the moment that we sleep. And you've got about 12% of your mind, which is your prefrontal cortex, which is logic, reasoning, decision making, and the rest is all subconscious triggers, programming, fears. So when you're talking about the current state of the world and what's going on, as many minds as you have, that's as many triggers as you can pick up. So many people have different backgrounds, different reasons, but at the core of it is the nervous system regulation, is the ability to, not remain in a certain state. So, I always tell my clients, you're going to have life happening, whether it's a divorce, whether it's a career change, whether it's war, that is horrible that we're going through, and famine, anything that a human being goes through. The idea isn't not to feel an emotion. The idea is to learn how to regulate it. The idea is to learn how to ride that wave, right? And it's not to stop the storm. It's to know how to live within it. It's to know that, okay, I feel this coming up. I feel that clamminess, that heart rate, that emotion. How do I deal with it? How do I regulate it? And more so than ever, as the world starts getting chaotic, more and more so, I think that's when the only way that we can handle it is by quieting the inner world, because we pick up on what is going on in our environment. We're supposed to pick up on what's going on in our environment, but a human being was never supposed to be exposed to so much outside terror, so much influenced by the outside world. A human being, a nervous system was designed to, the fight or flight is supposed to be get you in that situation, get you away from that saber tooth, and then keep you going, calm down. But for us, we're continually, that dopamine rush, not only with social media, but with what's happening in the world, constantly going on. So you're not going to eliminate it. So to me, it's about learning how to work with your body, learning how to Whether it's breath work, whether it's EFT or tapping, whether it's going in and doing some kind of other modulus, self regulation, whatever it is, but it's really that it's going to be more and more important.
So as the mind behind the mission of helping people get to that place, how do you remain hopeful every day? How do you take in what we're living with and transmute that into a positive energy for your clients?
And for me, it's like I said, it's a constant work in progress. Just like every other human on this planet, I have my moments, I have my good days, my bad days, but I've gotten better and better, and I still have a ways to go, but I've gotten a lot better at noticing and not remaining in the moment. So, noticing when I'm feeling, knowing when I'm feeling a little bit more than usual, than that I need to reach out and ask my therapist for help, and say, listen, I need more than just self hypnosis or self whatever it is, knowing when to ask for help, and to really know that I'm just as much of a human being as everybody in front of me.
So Anna, if you had a dream tonight and you ran into the 18-year-old version of you and you walked into a room and there was a film projector and you hit play on it, there was a 60-second highlight reel of this life you've lived, of the work you've done, would that young version of you believe that your life turned out this way?
Never. Oh my goodness, never. Oh, never, never, never. I am a very free spirit, and I think that part, just like in nature, the poison is always next to the antidote, it's kind of like this. It's two sides of the same coin. The part of me that has always been afraid to commit to something that I didn't really know what I wanted to do. But that's also what prevented me from jumping headfirst into something that wasn't right for me and being unhappy for many years. I kind of kept on searching. And so no, I wouldn't necessarily think I would believe where I ended up, but I think this is still a project in motion. It's still a work in progress.
So of everything that you've accomplished and evolved to at this point, what are you ultimately the happiest, the proudest of?
Well, I have an adult son, and I'm super proud of him. That's always been something that I feel, bringing another human into this world that I'm proud of, that I feel is, somebody that I can say is a legacy. That's one thing. Being able to affect people's lives, being able to follow my intuition, even when I, trusting my wings are going to work. Diving off that cliff, jumping off that cliff after a 23-year career was very lucrative and very successful, diving off that cliff to jump into a passion. So that to me would be something I would be really proud of.
So let's say you walked into a room of everybody that's known you throughout your career in a business sense, and you walk up, and it can be clients and colleagues, and you walk up to a podium and you could tell them one fun story about your life. Just something that was like the first concert you went to, a wonderful trip, a magical place that you visited, just something that would humanize you a little bit to that room. What would be a fun story you would tell that group?
Oh my gosh. Oh, wow. I don't know. Can we do one of those like little fast, Zoom clips or something where they could show like a fast reel of my whole entire life instead of just one moment?
We could do that. And we're doing audio now because and people can ignite that right now for sure.
Yeah, I think that would be better, is just those like super fast reels of everything. And then that way people can just kind of pick out the moment that, stands out the most.
For sure. So let me ask you this. Everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, everyone that knows you and all these different configurations, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
My perception of me is that it's nothing like what people think, because I feel that none of us are. I feel that all of us wear a certain mask, and I think that the mask that we present to the world is based on the glasses that they wear. And so I think that what people view others as is always based on their perception. So I would always say, the way that I present is probably very unique to how, I think all of us present in a very different way than what the world sees us.
So for anyone out there that's listening, who is it that you would like to speak to right now, to appeal to make that call, to reach out, to hire you, to get to that next place?
Anybody that feels like they have been continually doing the same thing, hoping for a different result. Anyone that is wondering, why do I know I want to go to the gym, but I just don't? Anyone that feels like, why do I continually remain in this relationship when I know it's not good for me? Anyone that doesn't either understands why they keep repeating the pattern, but doesn't feel they have it within them to change, or anyone that just doesn't even understand where it's coming from. I would love to speak to those people, because to me, making that change, making that difference in somebody's life is really why I got into this. There's nothing like knowing that you have actually affected somebody's life.
So the most important question right now, the next step, where do people go if they want to make a phone call, reach out, questions, hiring you, where do they go?
So, I think you could probably put show notes, all my contact info, but my phone number would be 818-263-3615. That you could send me DMs, you could send messages to that. You could, my Instagram, my social media, really any one of those avenues. Social media would be my full name, which is Anna Machkalov .hypnosis, and that's ANNAMACHKALOV .hypnosis, HYPNOSIS, or my website, annamachhypnosis.com. So any one of those will be a good place to start. And then I would love to chat with anyone. It does, I don't charge anything to do a quick consult call, a discovery call to see if this is right. And then we can go from there.
Sounds wonderful. I will put all of these links in the show notes. Anna, what a wonderful story. Thank you for your time. Thank you so much. Best of luck with everything.
Thank you, Joe. It's been an honor, and I'd love to talk to you anytime.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. Our esteemed theme music was composed and produced by the great E.E. Pointer of Kansas City's River Cow Orchestra. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.